Well, hello and welcome to the Riverfront Reds Show, where we will discuss all things Joey Votto, maybe. I don't know. I mean, Tim, Daniel, how's it going?
It's going, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. I'm when the baseball season comes, we're going to be excited again. I know we are, and that's good. And we certainly here in Central Ohio, it's been so cold, and we've got that big college football game coming up that we've already talked a little bit about on the network. But once that game's over, I was just realizing tonight we're recording on Thursday night. There's no Thursday night football whatsoever tonight.
That's right.
And so if you think about it, I think was it last Thursday was Notre Dame Penn State, right?
Uh-huh.
And then Friday we had Ohio State playing Texas, and NFL playoffs were going and all that over the weekend. But now, for the first time since basically August, we have no Thursday night football, and that's the harbinger of things to come of no football being available here pretty soon.
Yeah, that doesn't really bother me.
Well, that is fine. I usually use my Ohio State basketball Buckeyes to get myself through the winter, and yet again this year I'm not quite as thrilled with how they're doing, and so my football Buckeyes have gotten me pretty far.
Yes, they have. Yes,
but it's gonna be winter time here pretty soon on Monday night, regardless of the result, and we'll be looking into whether these Reds can do well or not. And speaking of the bit of news we do have this week, Tim, FanDuel Network is now the Reds' home for TV, and of course,
again.
Now, long story short, I guess FanDuel Network is what we would have known the last few years as Bally's. Before that, Fox Sports Ohio. Before that, Sports Channel, and all the different things over the years. But FanDuel Network, their parent company came out of bankruptcy just a week or so ago. And after signing a deal or saying they were signing a deal with Major League Baseball to run TV for them, the Reds now have reverse course, and they will be on FanDuel Network, which means they'll be about the same places as always. If you have cable or satellite, they'll be there. If you're out of network, if you're out of the local area and you like to get the package, it'll be the same, thing, the extra innings package. There will be more opportunity, it sounds like, to, do the a la carte deal, right? So people can watch that way. I guess, what do you think it means overall, though? Like, what was your thought when you saw it?
My first thought is hopefully that means that John Sadak is keeping his job, because I need him to always be doing Reds games. Well,
if you read between the lines, he's going on Reds Caravan.
So there you go. All right, fair enough. But as far as it feels like it's more kind of a situation where probably they couldn't make the technology work that they wanted with the MLB network, the MLB TV thing, which I was really looking forward to be honest with you. I was really, really excited about. So I was somewhat disappointed. Don't be wrong, I'm always going to be happy that the Reds are going to be on TV and we're going to be able to watch them. But I really wanted to kind of see what life would have been like on that route. Like you said, yeah, it does sound like a la carte route is going to be a little easier to get to now. So that's good for people like me who are using YouTube TV and don't want to switch over to Fubo to watch Reds games every night because it's far more expensive and also not as appealing to go through. But yeah, I think that, the good news is, hey, we know the Reds are going to be on television. By the sounds of things, it looks like we're going to keep our broadcast crew. And I don't know, maybe, there's some reports out there that maybe this means they're going to get some more money they can go use to sign some guys. So I don't know, is this like NIL for baseball?
Well, let me ask you this. What do you do for the Cavs? How do you, if you're a YouTube TV guy and they're on FanDuel, what do you do?
We have a joint account to watch the games through FanDuel's app.
Okay.
So I'll just probably, if they let me, I'll just probably use that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I had heard actually, boosting my other show here. I'm going to have writer and author and media personality John Keysweater on Red Leg Roundtable next week. He, of course, wrote the book Joe Nuxall, The Old Left-Hander and Me. And we're going to dig into some Joe Nuxall talk and some other things with the Reds over history. But he was talking about the idea that Alta Fiber, when they basically found out that the Reds weren't going to be on anymore, Alta Fiber cut FanDuel from their offering, and he's obviously concerned going forward if people that have Alta Fiber,
Sure.
will they not get it back? I'm assuming it would be like the first call that would be made, right? Is to jump right back into those homes, and of course the a la carte idea, if it stays at $20 a month. I mean, that's doable for a lot of folks who love the Reds. You do it for 6 months and then you're done. Um, I had my reservations. I was interested if they went with the Major League Baseball route. I tried to do some research on what the other teams were like. But I do still have DirecTV, and I do still utilize DVR quite a bit with putting kids to bed and different things like that,
Sure.
sporting events and things like that. So, a lot of times when they were on streaming services like Apple TV on a Friday night or something, I found that very tough because you
Yeah.
can't really manipulate it as like you can with just your regular DVR.
Do the free 2 months and
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see how it works here going forward. You made the point. Extra money. There's two problems. Number one, a lot of the free agents are gone.
yeah, a little too late.
But number two, showing a willingness, I guess, even when you have the money to spend it. And this ownership doesn't seem to show the interest in doing that right now. I was thinking the other day about some of the ways that COVID kind of affected my favorite sports teams, and certainly the Reds were as all in as they'd ever been under the Castellini family. And when 2020 hit, and they seem to have lost their shirt, or they'll tell you they did, and they don't seem willing to try to go down that road again. I just want to say one more thing, and we can, you can give me your thought on if they're going to spend the extra money. I was disappointed a little bit in the media coverage of this, and obviously, even going back to the MLB produced idea,
Yeah.
there just wasn't a ton of information out there. So it's like, well, okay, if I'm a reporter, which I actually am, and another, I don't cover the Reds as a writer, but if I was a reporter covering the Reds, I think I would go and try to get answers, and maybe they just tell you no comment. But that's when you say they had no comment on this, or they were unable to be reached, or something like that. And I read these stories by the local beat guys, and I just don't see it. And I don't know. I know Mark Sheldon at MLB.com, at Reds.com, he did a little more digging than I saw elsewhere. But I just don't know that the questions are being asked. And we've talked about that before in other ways, but I'm a little bothered by that.
Me too. I feel like there's definitely been kind of something where they're just kind of like going with okay, what does this mean? Like, is it like that? Like you said, like there's no guarantee they're going to spend the money. I think for us who are paying as close attention to the Reds as possible, we see it highly unlikely they're going to spend money, especially like you said, in January with spring training starting in about 6 weeks, and they haven't gone out and made anything quite yet. Now, albeit in the past, they have had a big move they've made in the past few weeks, last few weeks for spring training in the past, but what in 2000. So I don't see that happening. I don't know. Bronson Arroyo was pretty close to the spring training as well. I guess I can't be too mean.
Well, Bronson actually came like after spring training. Like the trade was because he didn't join the team until like this opening day was already over. He and David Ross both were signed late. Was it? Or no, maybe Bronson did, and they hadn't signed David Ross till late. I'm mixing things up, but yeah, I think it was late. It was in spring training. No, it's tough. You just don't know what they're going to do, and we'll just have to. We have to wait and see. That's the whole thing. Jesse Winker did re-sign with the Mets today. He got $8 million for 1 year, signaling to New York media that they're moving on from Pete Alonso.
Yeah, I saw that.
So do you want another infielder or a full-time DH?
I mean, the position I think I'm most concerned about is first base. So,
are you really?
Kind of.
I guess. Even if you had to fall back and put Steer there, you could. Which,
Yeah, that's like your best option is to
but
have Steer there.
that just moves you. My concern is more outfield,
I
obviously.
mean, obviously, yeah, but
Yeah,
like I should
but
say my infield most concern is first base because I
sure.
I don't know how much I trust CES, and I hope I'm wrong, but
We'll see. The CES and the OLV Marte are both, basically luxury items right now. If they come through, then all of a sudden you're flush, right?
yeah,
With almost too much, and you might make a trade even by the end of spring training or the end of April. But if you can't just count on those two guys, you almost have to feel like Marte will start at AAA, and we'll just have to see on that on CES as far as health too, staying healthy a whole year.
right.
But I don't really know what to expect there. If you are still on the Twitter, Chris Garber and I had a nice little back and forth. I'm at Shanerbaum on there. We had a nice back and forth about the media deal, the FanDuel deal, and I don't know if you knew this. Chris is a lawyer, and
Heard, yeah,
he had some very smart things to say about what possibly is happening and in the timing of everything, even though people aren't talking. Well, hey, this week, without much news, to report, Tim and I want to kick off what is now hard to believe, the 15-year anniversary of the 2010 season. These Reds were the first to make the playoffs, or obviously since 1995 at that point.
yep,
And it was a magical season for a lot of us. And it was a season that saw it was the beginning of a nice stretch. Now, I guess we would probably go back to 07 or 08 when this all started, with the pieces starting to come together and some younger guys coming up. But really, the beginning of the 2010 season and what it became started on July 31st, 2009.
right,
And Walt Jocketty, all the teams that were movers and shakers and the teams that were trying to make the playoffs were moving to get in line for the best players at the time, sending prospects. The Reds, everybody assumed would be sellers. And in this instance, they were not. They were buyers. They traded Edwin Encarnacion, Josh Rinicky, and Zach Stewart to Toronto for one Scott Rowland. Do you recall what you felt about that trade at the time?
I do. I remember kind of at the moment not being much of a believer in Edwin anymore,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously,
You can thank Brenneman for that, by the way.
yeah, I'm sure that didn't help. But so I was pretty excited. I felt like it was kind of a nice thing where, you had Joey already at first base, so you're kind of solidifying the corners. You already had Brandon Phillips. So it kind of felt like even though he wasn't the Scott Rowland that was beating the Reds as a Cardinal all those years, it still felt like he was still a solid player, and he turned out to be for a couple of years there for the team as well. Um, and so for me, it was something where I was really excited. I thought like, okay, cool, this is like a nice step. Um, and if you remember, at the time, you were like, oh, yeah, we got this great young outfield too with Bruce and Dickerson.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up not being the case, obviously. But yeah, I remember like liking the Scott Rowland move. It felt like it was kind of like a get ready for next year kind of move. And, you and I have both talked to Drew Stubbs under separate shows about that team and that move. And it kind of felt like it gave the team a little pep in their step too, because not only did they trade for Scott Rowland in 09, if you remember, they got on a nice little run there at the end of the year too.
Yeah, they did. I was going through some photos when Joey Votto officially retired, and I remember being at a game where I think it was against Cleveland, maybe. I think no, and maybe I'm not sure what it was, but a friend of mine's a Cleveland fan.
Mhm.
His dad's an eye doctor, and remember Jacob Cruz?
Yeah.
He had played for Cleveland, and he actually went to see my friend's dad, and then he went to Cincinnati. And so he left my friend tickets a few times, and we went down, and they were good seats. They were players, family and things like that area. And so these photos I have are pretty good, low to the field and things like that. And I just remember the joy of Bruce and Votto and Phillips and Dickerson that, originally
Yeah.
08, late 08 and then into 09. And just the joy of these younger players coming up, Cueto and Volquez. I had pictures of Cueto. He wasn't even pitching that night, but he was,
Yeah.
And so when they made this trade, it was explained pretty quickly, but a lot of people had questions. And I knew people. Actually, around that time, I knew the guy who was. Remember the A ball, the high A was in Lynchburg.
Yeah.
So I knew the play-by-play announcer there, and then I knew Matt Andrews at Louisville at the time, and so I knew I knew of a lot of these guys. These guys up and coming. And Renicky, of course, played. He actually played at UCLA, and I knew their PA announcer out there. So I had like, I know all these guys, who they are.
You
So
know the connects.
I was a little sad when Renicky was traded, and Zach Stewart was a pretty highly touted prospect, but neither of them really did much in the big league. And remember, I think you reminded us a few weeks ago, Edwin Encarnacion was actually DFA'd by the Blue Jays at one point after this trade. So he wasn't 40 home runs a year, Edwin, even then. So in the long run, at the time, it felt like they did pretty well. I think nationally, though, it was panned, senseless move. It was Jocketty just bringing in all his guys, which we'll get to that in a few minutes. It was pretty funny. I was looking at something about 2010 and saw all the former Reds, like the former Cardinals on the Reds, and then the former Reds that actually were on the Cardinals, and then even the future Reds who were on the Cardinals in 2010.
Yeah.
So it's just funny. But anyway, we saw immediately, though, the dividends, and Joey Votto's talked a whole lot. That Scott Rowland's one of the guys he mentions. And when Scott Rowland got announced that he was going to the Hall of Fame, I remember Joey had a post about leadership and talent and all the things he had. There weren't a whole lot of moves, though. I was talking about the 1999 season a lot, even when I had Denny Nagel on, and there were several moves before that year came together. Arthur Rhodes, Johnny Gones, Ramon Hernandez had already been added, right? They were kind of additions that didn't come up through the system, but they came in 2009. They did add Orlando Cabrera, the all-star or the playoff making shortstop. Like he had that run where he made the playoffs like every year. The starting rotation was interesting, though, Tim, because remember all those years they went without a homegrown talent.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they've got homegrown guys, except for, of course, Arroyo and Harang. And then at that year in 2010, Volquez was still there, so they had added him.
Yeah, because Volquez came on the big league club in the middle of the year, right? He was hurt for a long time.
Yeah, he didn't have the full season of starting, so they did start mostly homegrown guys, including Cueto and Leak. And oh man, who was the lefty? I had it listed.
Shucks.
Yeah, we're bad. This is awful.
Hold on. I'll do the baseball reference. Jebron.
So we are, Travis Wood.
Travis Wood, yeah,
he's a local guy.
Dude, I really thought Travis Wood was going to be the truth. I was really high on Travis Wood.
Oh man, and he actually he pitched better than anybody really in that playoffs too.
Remember he had the almost perfect game in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they start 2010, and they're only 12-11 in April. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're okay. We're above 500, but we didn't really know what we had yet in this team. They got going a little bit in May. Some memorable moments, and I want you to bring any if you have any. Of course, the All-Star game. Votto and Phillips and Rowland make the All-Star game. And Rowland's on first base. And again, he's older at this point. He was a rookie back in 1997. So it's not as if he was he was never Ricky Henderson on the base paths anyway. But
right.
He's on first, and he goes first to third on a single to short right field. And Brandon Phillips is mic'd up in the dugout, and he's like, first to third. That's what we do in Cincinnati. Always remember that.
Always.
Because as well as I do, there were very few times when Reds got anything going at All-Star games in most of our lifetime. I mean, Chris Sabo being allowed to steal third base or whatever, or second base in the 1988 All-Star game, barely getting to play at all. And Barry Larkin sat the bench the whole night. And
I remember Brett Boone in 98 didn't get in the game.
Yeah. And of course, Jeff Shaw. Well, Brett Boone was only there because Jeff Shaw got traded to the Dodgers before the game and actually wore a Dodger uniform for the first time. So here's our closer pitching in the All-Star game wearing somebody else's uniform. So that, that tells you a little bit. Now, where were you on August 10th, 2010, when they had the brawl with the Cardinals?
I went to the game the night before,
Okay.
and so
My,
I saw the beginning of the sweep.
my brother-in-law was at the game. And again, I'm telling you, even back then, I would DVR if we had plans. And for baseball, like, especially back then, I was on Twitter, but it wasn't the way it is later on, like where you could turn things off and nobody would tell you, right?
Right.
So I go home and zip through the commercials and catch up. Well, we went to dinner, and I still remember where I was. We were at Easton Town Center in Columbus at California Pizza Kitchen, and we're eating dinner, and my brother-in-law starts calling me. And I'm like, why is he calling? And I think I knew he was at the game. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, can you believe this? What are you seeing on TV? What's happening? I'm like, what do you mean? It's only like the first inning. What are you talking about? Like, I'm not at home. What do you mean? Oh my goodness, there's a huge brawl. And he starts telling me. And of course, Phillips had told reporters, right, that the Cardinals were whiny little B words.
Mm-hmm.
And he then comes up to the plate, of course. He was a leadoff hitter at that time. He comes up to the plate. He tapped the shin guards of the umpire. He tapped the shin guards of Yadi Molina, and Molina stood up right away. And it was on.
It was on.
And so do you remember watching on TV, though?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you weren't there in person, but you got to see it at least.
Yeah.
So, okay, Paul Keels, Ohio State football and basketball announcer, Cincinnati guy. He actually called UC games years and years ago.
Yeah.
He called Detroit Pistons games too at one time. I didn't know if you knew that. So Paul Keels had a part-time stint as helping out the TV there. He was calling the game on TV that night. And so that was interesting when I put up YouTube today. Of course, Baker and LaRussa got after it. They actually reignited it. I think it was starting to calm down.
Yeah.
Remember Chris Carpenter? Me and a guy I used to work with at the newspaper, we would always, anytime we saw Chris Carpenter on TV, we'd say, what am I going to tell my son?
Yeah. Oh my
What
God.
do I tell my son?
We definitely ran the wheels in Cincinnati off that joke.
I'm fighting with Scott Rowland. What do I tell my son? Of course, the unfortunate Johnny Cueto, Jason LaRue situation. The funny thing about that is Jason LaRue ended up having issues, right? Like with concussions and things like that from being kicked by Johnny Cueto because Cueto was being pinned against the backstop.
Yeah.
But in the video, it's interesting that had already happened, and LaRue's still kind of around. And I'm not, concussions are weird. So, but that was just kind of weird. The former Reds on that team, LaRue, Dennis Reyes was on that team.
That's right.
Felipe Lopez was on that team. And the guy that I made a comment with one of our followers, Reds Cat, he's a big baseball card guy on Twitter. He mentioned Kyle Loesch today. Kyle Loesch was on that team, and Kyle Loesch, I don't know which. It's probably him, but Ryan Dempster and Kyle Loesch go in that decade before that of guys who pitched for the Reds, but got better somewhere else later.
Yeah.
And he was very good for the Cardinals. Dempster very good for the Cubs after he left the Reds. And I've heard Dempster say, I was terrible that year. They have reason to not like me in Cincinnati or whatever. But yeah, Loesch was on that team. I mean, Ryan Ludwig was still on the team in St. Louis. He would come to the Reds later.
Yeah.
Of course, Jim Edmonds would be a Red later that year, which was unfortunate.
Wasn't it? It's still is weird to say.
It is. I just never liked Jim Edmonds. I thought, of course, being Griffey fans, probably your reasoning is probably just like mine. Mm-hmm. It just felt disingenuous sometimes when Edmonds would say or do things. So no, and you mentioned the sweep. They lost that game. They actually got swept in the series. People forget that kind of made us lose a little hope, right? We're talking August, those are the dog days. In 2006, the dog days of September and August and September kind of brought the Reds down, and we'd been through this before. But we didn't know if they knew how to win yet, and they did have Scott Rowland. But get this, man, they won 7 games in a row after that series.
I remember that, yeah.
They went from being down to the Cardinals a game after the series after the winning streak. They were 20 games over 500, and they had a 4.5 game lead.
Yeah, and just around the corner was September call-ups and the debut of Aroldis Chapman.
That's right. That's right. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. Personal memories.
Okay, so I was at the first win of the year, that first series against the Cardinals, where they lost the first 2 games and then they won. It's a really cold April afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and they beat Johnny Gums. It's a walk-off.
Okay.
So I think the game was like 2-1, if I remember correctly. It was one of those. They were down 1-0 and they had a little comeback. I went to a game that year in the afternoon. They played the Phillies at home, and they beat Roy Halladay 3-2, hitting 3 solo shots. Roy Halladay pitched all 8 innings, so he technically got a complete game loss, which is very rare at that time. So that was pretty cool. And then, I was at Clinchmas. I've talked about that many times.
You were, yes, that's right.
Yeah, so I've talked about that many of times. And then I really remember September 11th. This was like the short time at that point in the year where Joey was slumping. Like, it was very, very short. But he broke out of his slump hitting a walk-off against the Pirates to go ahead and give the Reds the win. And he got back on his MVP ways, because I think he just had like a bad week.
Sure.
First time all year he had a bad week. And then all of a sudden he just hits that homer and he's right back to where he was. But do you also remember, Seth, you mentioned the All-Star game that year. So Joey makes it, Brandon makes it, Scott Rowland makes it. Joey was the final vote. We had to work like hell to get Joey into the All-Star game.
Yes, that's true. And then, we mentioned the brawl. How many years after that? At least once, maybe twice. I think twice, Tony La Russa left Johnny Cueto and or Brandon Phillips off the roster because he got the pick or whatever. So those were things too. I've told the story before. I'll tell it again, I guess. Somewhere along that summer, my wife and I are sitting on couches or laying on 2 different couches, kind of like at an L, and we're watching the Reds play. And we could not agree on a name for our son. She was pregnant. She was due in October. And the way I remember it is Joey Votto hits a home run. He's rounding the bases. And I say, well, how about Joey for a name? And she says, hey, I like it. Yeah, okay. And that was that. All right. And you fast forward X amount of weeks later, he wins the MVP. We go to the hospital. We have the baby. We bring the baby home, and a couple come and visit us. And the guy in front of my wife says, I can't believe. And I never said, I never told him this, because I can't believe she let you name him after Joey Votto. And she's like, well, I didn't. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, sure. But the funny thing, you go back, I've told that story, like the original name I had was Evan, because it was during Evan Turner's National Player of the Year season that we found out we were pregnant. And the joke is that if she didn't let me name him Joey, unfortunately the quarterback of the Buckeyes at the time's name was Terrell. So I was like, what am I going to try to name him? Terrell? Memory of Chapman as well. It wasn't his first game that he pitched, I don't think, but Matt Andrews finished the Louisville season, and he went up to GABP, and he said, hey, why don't you come up and meet me? Now, it was cutting it a little close. We were about 2.5, 3 weeks before the due date, maybe closer to 3.5 weeks. And I talked to my wife, and she said, you'll be fine. You go on down there and enjoy the game. So I met Matt down there, and we sat in the scout seats, and then Jim Kelch was up in the booth. He had made that transition, or at least was doing some of the games. And so we got to go up and see Jim and Marty, and we talked to them, and then we got back down to our seats in time to see Chapman pitch. And, that was amazing. As hard as he threw, and as spectacle as it was, this was a team that was already going to go to the playoffs. Pretty much, they hadn't clinched yet, but you knew they were going to go to the playoffs, and yet that was still the spectacle when he got to come in the game.
Yeah, so he's the winning pitcher in Clinchmas.
Yes.
And so
And
I was at the game, and that was the first time I saw him pitch in person. I was like, "Holy crap, this is
yeah,
crazy."
and that's like a week or so after I saw him pitch. And so Clinchmas, Tim Burdick, right?
Tim Burdick.
Through the pitch that Jay Bruce put over the center field wall.
Yeah.
Jay's not a guy that shows anybody up, and yet he put his hand up in the air immediately, and that was great. And again, here we are, my wife and I. We don't really at this point. I think we went to a movie here or there, went to dinner, but she was ready to have this baby, right? And
Yep.
it's like we're just gonna stay home and watch the game. And I still remember watching it, and I remember how happy I was, and that drought, we're talking since 1995 at that point.
15 years.
I
We're
mean,
rivaling it now.
well, we're right there. Yes.
Yeah. Not really. I mean, if you count 2020, but I don't.
No, it's hard to count 2020
Yeah.
because A, we couldn't go see anything, and B, it was a weird truncated deal where so many teams got in. I don't know, man. Votto winning the MVP, you never could have convinced me that they're going to give it to him over Pujols. Like
Same.
they still gave the Silver Slugger to him, to Pujols. Votto actually, I did a Sporkle quiz the other day, and I was reminded that Joey Votto never won a Silver Slugger.
That's right.
And Jay Bruce has like 2. Like
Brandon Phillips has one.
It doesn't make any sense. Well, but it's by position, and so yeah. But the idea that, and I know Votto had a few inconsistent years, but man, to look back on it and think about that, and then to think about the times he didn't make All-Star teams, because a few of his years he closed so well.
Yeah,
he did so well the last 2 or 3 months. He was a great July and August hitter. And didn't always make the All-Star team because of maybe earlier season stuff. But Joey Votto did win the MVP. He was just amazing that year.
It was a spectacle, man. It was like every day you went to the ballpark, you expected he was going to do something amazing. That was like when people started really kind of paying attention to, how much of an advantage it was to work counts and get walks, and what he was able to do with that, and how that really revitalized his career. You can really make the case it's one of the best lineups he's ever had around him, and that's not saying a whole lot by any means, but hitting between Phillips at the time, he was a good hitter, and Bruce, who was up and down. I mean, if you remember Bruce ended up at like 281 that year, but it took a little bit to get to that point. It was just an awesome year, man. And he just always found ways to make wins happen. It was just, it's something I'll never forget. And I remember before they go take off for Philly, I went to the rally thing they did at Fountain Square before they got on the bus. We don't need to talk about what happened in Philly, obviously.
Yes.
But when Dusty literally makes Joey speak.
Oh yeah, and he was not comfortable back then.
No, and all of Fountain Square is chanting MVP, MVP, MVP. It was
That's
really
awesome.
cool.
That's cool that you were able to do that. Hey, so the crazy thing about, you said that the lineup, this is insane, because for years later, we just wished we had guys to get on base, right?
Yeah.
All right. At catcher, Ramon Hernandez played the most games. He had a 364 on base. Joey Votto led the league with a 424 on base. One of the 7 times I believe he did that. Even Brandon Phillips got on at a 332 clip that year. But Scott Rowland was a 358, and Jay Bruce was 353.
Nice.
I mean, that's getting it done. And certainly, guys got on base, guys knocked guys in. Votto led the team with 113 RBI, but he had 37 home runs that year as well. Just, you're right. I mean, as far as WAR goes, and if I go by Baseball Reference WAR, Joey Votto had a 7.
Pretty good.
Yeah, but Bruce had 4.7.
Yeah, he was
great. Pretty good too, and Phillips was 3.9. So, and Rowland was actually 4.1.
Yeah, he was really. I mean, they were both really good that year.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned the starting rotation. The number of games started: Arroyo had 33, Cueto 31. And then everybody else seemed to have something going on, because Leake had 24 as a rookie, right?
Yeah.
That was his rookie year.
That was the year he did not pitch in the minors.
Yeah, he never pitched in the minors, yep. Aaron Harang had 22 starts, Homer Bailey 19, and Travis Woods 17. And even we talked a little bit about Volquez earlier. He started 12 games, so he was not much of a factor there.
Yeah, he also started in Philly game 1.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Which at the time you thought, hey, we got him back and he's ready to rock and all that, but
Not me. I was never a Volquez believer.
not even the one was 080 pitched pretty well.
He
He was
did.
an all-star for the Reds, right?
Yeah.
I was a little salty they gave up Hamilton for him though.
I think that's probably why I was like,
Yeah.
I was much younger than I am now, obviously. So, and then he had the suspension. Was it 20? He had the suspension, or was it the year before that?
I don't know. But the crazy thing about the Hamilton thing was, I think I'm in the same boat as you. Is I was they just switched the new uniforms in 07,
Yeah.
right? And I still like the home look. I think it's a good look.
You're wrong, but that's okay.
Okay. So I go looking at jerseys and I stumble on this website that sells patches. And I found it was basically an authentic jersey, but without a number or name on it. Okay. And I was like, I found the patch to make Hamilton and then 33. And I could do all this. My mom actually sewed it on for me. I don't sew. But I did all this and I was like, I got a Hamilton jersey. And like a month later, they traded him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Argh! And I assume they wanted pitching, right? But I assume they were worried about Hamilton going forward and kind of what. And it became obviously he won the MVP in 2010. So
Yeah.
Hamilton and
I had the Louisville Best did a bobblehead for both of them when they were both
okay.
on there, and I had it somewhere.
Because 08 was the last year at Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, when they had the All-Star game there, right? He won the home run derby that next year, right? 08.
Yeah.
But he didn't win the MVP till 2010, and so
No, he broke the record, but Justin Morneau won the Derby. Yeah.
But he was still the guy everybody was
Right.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
For sure.
That was weird because they switched how they did it again because they always switch.
Yeah.
But no, it would have been interesting to see if he would have been with the Reds still by 2010. But regardless, they still had a great season. And you're right. We don't want to mention the playoffs. I do remember one of the games I ended up having to go to cover a high school football game. It was because the Reds played on a Friday night.
Yep.
And they
Brandon Phillips hits a leadoff homer. You're like, oh, this is going to be good.
They probably started around 5 or 5:30. So I think I saw part of it at home, and then I had to go to the game. And then, it still didn't go well, did it?
It started out great. Roy
Yeah.
Oswalt was pitching for Philly that day. Things were going, we get a home run from Phillips to start the game. Bruce hits a homer, and then Bruce loses the foul ball and the fly ball in the stand and the lights, and it goes downhill from there.
Yeah, it's just not something we want to remember, I guess.
But we do.
The season as a whole certainly started a nice little stretch there, and I'm sure we'll do more this year to remember that because it is 15 years, and we do like to look at the past because we don't have as much to talk about the present.
Right.
So we'll see. I had a nice, we had a Red Leg roundtable with Herm Winningham. It's 35 years since 1990.
Nuts.
And Herm and I we texted some more today. I was digging up some car. I was going through a box and I found this.
Nice.
It's a Pepsi Herm Winningham, and they even had like a print of his signature on the back.
That's funny.
So I sent him a picture of that, and he liked it a lot. So, no, remembering the 1990 World Series, it's like actually the team will be remembering the 75 series, I'm sure. That one's 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of history to think about, but hopefully we'll have more 2025 memories that are made this year. That'd be something.
I sure hope so, Seth. I mean, Tyler Stevenson did get a nice payday at arbitration, so good for him.
Yeah.
So feels like an all-star year for him this year. I'm feeling it.
When you hosted last week, were you able to go over all those arbitration deals?
No, I was Joel and I were just kind of talking about like all the transactions because that was the week of the Lux trade, and We hadn't been on since discuss the Trevino trade, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I don't feel like they overpaid anybody too much. I think Stevenson
No.
earned the raise he got, and Brady Singer I think got some nice money too. So good for them.
Well, and of course, when you were about to trade for a guy like that, you look at that and
Right.
the general area that he's going to get. Well, let's go through a few or a couple. I had to discuss with my sons what a couple and a few means the other day. A couple viewer mail questions. I asked for any comments on 2010, but we got some other things as well. Loyal friend Pat Magooch says, "Is Chad and Nate in cryogenic slumber?" Yeah, they both want to see Ted Williams play again. And so they went ahead and went into the freeze. And whenever Ted's head is rescued, they will also be brought back. So that's
Yeah.
where Chad and Nate are.
They also told me that they're going to bring Walt Disney back, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, just no Tar Baby. Okay.
Right.
Um, he asks, and we talked about this a little bit. Also, what's more of a need, a right-handed slugger or a right-handed high relief arm?
I would say slugger. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I know they didn't. What was it? They struck out this week on what's his face, Estevez, um, which was not shocking at all. But yeah, I mean, I think that I know a lot of people are really down on Alexis Diaz. I think he's gonna be good this year. Really, he was really good the last few months of the year, so I think he's gonna carry that into this season.
Well, and Buck Farmer's still available, right? So
Yeah, what the heck is that about?
they can go get him if they want to. Yeah, I right-handed slugger all the way on that one. Although maybe Spencer Steer will be your right-handed slugger that you didn't really know you needed.
Yeah, or CES.
Yeah.
Don't want to count it out.
So he also said shout out to Orlando Cabrera. So yes,
OCAB.
yeah, that guy was like I said, he went everywhere to be in the postseason. Now you have the other one, do you, or do you want me to pull it up?
Yeah, it's good friend Skylar Webker, my co-host on one of my other shows.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, not specifically the 2010 team, but I'll forever remember Chapman the Red. I remember getting straight A Reds tickets from my high school and seeing the Cuban Missile throw 106 miles in a blowout game. That dude was electric when he entered the game. I say this forever in the sense that, like, when he came out of the ninth inning, it was like a showman. It was totally pro wrestling. It was like the gate would open. He would stop there at the edge before, like, he walked into the outfield track. Rage Against the Machine would play, and he'd run out, and you were like, "This freaking rules!" Like, I'm hyped. And
Yeah,
like if you had like a close like La Rosa's Pizza game where it's like he had like 9
that's
strikeouts
right, right.
going into the ninth, you knew
He's
you were
gonna get up,
fun.
he's gonna get 2 or 3, and we're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was telling somebody a story recently when my son was 4.5. So it would have been later. It would have been before he got. It would have been the 2014 season, or maybe the 20. We traded him in before the 16 season.
Yeah.
So it might have been the 2015 season. I took my son to his first game, and it was a Thursday afternoon game. Look, it's a 2+ hour drive from here, so you're kind of
You're making a day out of it. Yeah.
you're making a day out of it, but you're also like, is this going to work out? He's only 4. So I was happy if he could make it through 5 innings, right? And I take him down there early enough to let him play in the playground area. And then we go upstairs. I promised him how good the hot dog would be. So I couldn't believe it. He stood patiently in line while I got him a hot dog. We went and ate. At one point, he asked for ice cream, and I got him ice cream. But beyond that, we stayed in the seats through 6 innings. Then he says, "Hey, can we go back to the playground?" Okay, we'll take you down to the playground. So I watched on the TV there, outside that area there, the kids' land. I watched an inning there, a half inning. I said, "All right, buddy, let's go." And we sat in right field and watched the Reds bat in the 8th. And in between innings, we walked all the way around the outfield because I parked on the other side of the arena in the garage there. So we sat in the bleachers in left field right in the front row, and you could feel the heat off of the smokestacks when they do the fire.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, dude, he's 4 years old, and he's just mesmerized by Chapman. Chapman on the mound, strike 3, fire. He was hooked that day if he wasn't already. And we made it through all 9 innings, and he was asleep before we got to Kings Island. So good deal there. And
Beat that.
but Chapman was just amazing. Like you couldn't believe. Even I remember going to a game and we were on the my sister's friend got us on the riverboat, in center field. We were on the deck there, and you can look down at the bullpen and just him warming up.
Yeah.
Like the way he contorted his body and throwing left-handed and all that. No, he was amazing, and he's still pitching the big leagues, but he's not what he was. I saw him in person a time or two the last couple of years, and he's not what he was certainly, but back then, man, he was something else.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird seeing him play for the Red Sox. It's gonna be really weird.
Yeah, but he's been gone for so long now that it's
Right.
I think didn't you politic for him to
I
come
haven't stopped.
back?
Yeah, I haven't stopped. What do you mean politicked?
Yeah.
Everyone thought I was crazy, but I was like, he was pretty decent last year for the Pirates. I wasn't like saying like go have him pitch the ninth inning by any means, but
What do you think? And we'll close after this. What do you think would have happened if certain people would have got their way and they would have made him a starter?
that's what should have happened.
Well, yes, but I'm asking you what would have happened. Like what would have come of it?
I think he would have figured it out. I think he would have been a really consistent all-star starter. I really do. I mean, if you look at realistically, he was so talented. And everyone was always like, you can't throw 105 for 7 innings. It's like nowadays, it's like that's normal.
Yeah.
But I think he would have. I mean, that split finger he had was so filthy that he can mix in pitches. He had multiple pitches. I think he would have been pretty successful as a starter.
Dusty Baker's won a World Series now, finally.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of water under the bridge since he left Cincinnati. But that was one of the things that I found unforgivable.
Yeah.
It felt as if he thought Chapman was like his security blanket, and he had to have him there in the bullpen. And my goodness, all I could see was Randy Johnson, only a better athlete.
Yeah. I mean, what happens if Ryan Madsen doesn't get hurt for 2012?
Was he ever even healthy?
That's the $1 million question. But
He took a lot of money for doing nothing.
yeah, he did. And then later just becoming a public enemy of the Reds by hitting Joey.
Yeah. Yeah. The second that happened, that was like, oh, now I'm mad for 2 reasons at you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you and Ben back on Sunday night?
Yeah, we started doing our breakdown for relief pitchers. Just kind of talking about how that's looking for the season and give our thoughts there as well. If you guys have any questions you want us to answer, come hang out live or send in the Patreon or whatever. We'll definitely answer them. So we're doing position by position right now till the season starts. Just kind of going spot by spot. We started with starting pitching last week because that's like just the strength of the team. And so now we're gonna go into the relievers and kind of dive deep into what we got going on there. So it's gonna be fun.
If you stagger this enough, they might add another shortstop before you get to infielders.
Right. Yeah. I'm hoping that if we get like long enough that we'll have a new right-handed outfielder by the time we get there.
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Okay. And then certainly we're still touching base with the Bengals show every week. Defensive coordinator maybe in the offing.
I don't like what I'm hearing, Seth.
I was going to ask you about that. Al Golden maybe coming back down to the Queen City.
Yeah. It's like I love it, but I don't because I really like what he's doing now and where he's at. And but I still get to root for him. So
yeah, I just Marcus Freeman will have somebody in place or he'll do it himself.
Right.
He'll have it figured out.
Yeah.
He's a good defensive coach. And I'm assuming when we do our Bengals show, are we going to tap into Ohio State Notre Dame a little more for Monday? Is that the place where we get to do that, or are we?
It's game plan.
All right. Well, maybe we can get Ben to join us. And Tuesday, I should have John Keysweater to talk about Joe Nuxall and his remembrances of the Reds in his life living in and around Cincinnati. He covered media a lot in his career as well. So not only that's how he got to know Joe so well, but not only that, he certainly knew Marty really well. And I'll find that interesting to talk to him a little bit about because we talked yesterday by phone and some of the stuff with FanDuel and things like that we may get into. I told him I usually talk 99% history and talking about that kind of thing, but having him on will be a good opportunity to kind of bend his ear a little bit as to what he makes of all this. So
yeah, for sure. It'll be a fun interview. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, hey, Tim, we made it through another one, and the cryo freeze is still frozen, and
Yeah.
we'll put another quarter in that jukebox and hope that Chad and Nate are okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did text with him today. It seems like everything's all right, but
Well, for Joey Votto and Lisa Alberto and Aroldis Chapman, Tim Daniel, I am Seth Shaner, and so long, everybody.
see ya.